Welcome back. I hope you're all doing well. You'll be glad to know that as we progress through these videos, the amount of time that I will be speaking will be much shorter. Now, last week we covered the press defense. As you see here, the whole-back has a very difficult job, constantly holding position. And when that happens, he refers to it as a help defense. It's very much more that you're transitioning to a drop defense. But the help defense, I think, is important to go through because more than a formation, it is a defensive concept. There's no point marking a player like I apologize. There's no point pressing a player in the 3 position, their whole back, if 2 is on 2 meters or the whole 4 gets the ball. You need to come back and help. So that's what this week we'll be covering, and I will try and interject as little as possible to shorten the video.
The perimeter, turn side, guarding the ball. Now, we are not able to stay in a press at all times. We will lose position at 2 meters, ending up behind at set. Once we lose position at 2 meters, we need to think about helping. Our primary place to help is going to be in the 2-meter position. If the ball is able to be thrown into 2 meters, I'll go back to our example with the ball at 4. If the ball is entered into 2 meters, we need to have someone helping back at 2 meters. What we will do.
So, very briefly, the reason you're doing this is if you were playing a press and the whole back is here, the ball will very easily go into the whole forward, and now this person can take a shot from 2-meter line, either strong side here shot or backhand this side. So this player here, this player here, this player here. These 2 players are still liabilities because if you go in here, they can just swim into a position and they're shooting on 2 meters. These 3 players on the outside will be able to move in, but they have a worse shooting position. So if this player has the ball here, you're not defending anything. It's better that, say, player 3 come back, help crash the defense, because if the whole forward passes the ball back out again, you can just swim out to them again, and this gives your whole back time to regain their press position in the defense.
In this case, it's most likely to be X2 that will be crashing back in to help. We want to double the 2-meter player so that we don't create an isolation here and allow an easy shot or a situation where we could have an ejection at 2 meters. We'd rather play 6-on-6 than play 5-on-6. So our first and fundamental help.
Another thing that's actually very important. I am a qualified referee, so I will say this with authority. If a whole back is pressing down a whole forward who has the ball from behind, the whole back will generally get excluded. You'll have a man down. If I see that the whole forward is going to lose the ball because someone is crashing in from a different position, generally I'm more likely to give the benefit of the doubt to defense because it wouldn't have made a difference. The defense is going to get the ball anyways. So that's another reason you have to help your whole back, because whole back has 3 exclusions where they're sent out for a game. If you don't help come back and crash and they excluded 3 times because they got turned, you don't have a whole back anymore, and it's a position that needs to be trained for. You can't just throw anyone in there.
Is a crash. Crashing back at 2 meters. When we do this, especially if we drop off of a player who is a really strong shooter, and with a team primarily being right-handed, this being the better scoring side of the pool, this player 2 is probably a pretty significant threat to score. So while we are helping back on 2 meters, we need the adjacent defender or defenders to help over. So when we crash, we might even help up at X1 slightly, but not too far, as we don't want to leave an unguarded shot.
Okay, now this is where Wall Pro starts to get complicated, especially in defense. The press is one person has 1 player. You're responsible for that 1 player. You'll see in other forms of defenses, you are responsible for more than 1 player. And generally what you'll be responsible for is an area or other positions. So say X3 here. they can be responsible for O2 or O4 as well as O3. When you need to have your extra defender marking the hole, other players assume other responsibilities than just their one player, and that is why the press defense is very simple in execution but very difficult in effort. This one is difficult in execution and effort, which is why you always have to have your head up, looking around and communicate with one another.
For the player at one of the places, assuming we get the ball here at 2 meters on a foul, it's very common for a team that is right-hand dominant to drive from the 2 position or the 3 position, very often toward this power shooting side. With the ball being at 2 meters, a right-hander driving in from the 2 position is in a good position to receive the ball right-handed and get a quick shot. It's a very high percentage scoring area here just outside this left post. In this event, we need to discourage. We want to discourage the ball from being passed there in the first place. And the player at X1, assuming that X2 is beat on this drive, is in a position to step back in to help and discourage the ball being thrown to that driver. However, he or she must not give up awareness and lose track of the player at 1 who could come up into the pocket or swim toward the goal to a backdoor position. So even as we're helping back here, we probably want to maintain a position where our feet are back and head is out toward X1. We just step back in, discourage the ball being passed here, force it to go out to 1 or elsewhere. So our 2 forms of help are to crash on 2 meters and to discourage passes to drivers. There are other times when we are playing as a team that may have weak outside shooters, or a particularly strong 2-meter player.
Okay, just before we move on there, very briefly, I'd like you to really go back over that segment and understand why that player is dropping off. It's not like what you used to do with the press where you're just dropping off for the sake of it. If at all possible, it is better to be up in the face of that player to deny them the ball. But you have to look at what X1 is doing back here. X1 is, instead of pressing this player, so this player may still get the ball. If you watch the shooting angles video, you'll realize this is a terrible shooting position. The goalkeeper will cover this. So this is a bad shooting position. X1 isn't even giving them a shot. What X1 is doing is they're denying O2 a shot while also denying O1 a shot. So that's what you have to be thinking about in defense when you're not pressing. You can't be in a random position and hope for the best. You have to be, okay, why am I here as X1? I'm denying O2. I'm denying O1. That is your thought process. It's not, I'm going to step off this player here, because then O2 is going to drive in here. X2 will be behind them, so they can't foul them. If that happens, what will happen is the whole forward will move over to here, and suddenly it's a 2-on-1 on 2 meters. So X1 has to be here. They have to be aware of both players, and they have to have an intention behind their positioning. Now, X1 has to be aware of both players. I said that. It's not just O2 you have to be aware of. If your head is constantly looking here, this player will swim around you, get into this position, catch the ball from anyone here, and score. So you have to be looking at both players.
On 2 meters, and to discourage particularly strong 2-meter player requiring more help on 2 meters. If that were the case, we might just go into a drop.
Okay, that's all for the defense. The help defense is more reactive. People will set up. It's when you set up in a press and the press. It's when you set up in a press and the press breaks down. So that's what I want you to start comprehending. Number 1, the transition from a press to helping, and number 2, that in attack and defense, in everything you do, you have to be reasoning. You have to have a reason for why you're in a position. It's not just random. You think it's a good idea because you have to be, this is a good idea because I'm denying 2 players the opportunity to score. Thankfully this video is shorter. We'll move on now to the attack segment, which will be in a moment.